Welcome to Fiction Flux. Today we are starting a brand new fanfic. What if Momo Yaoyorozu had fallen in love with Deku from day one at UA Academy? Part 1. Let's not waste any time and get started. She noticed him before she understood what noticing meant. That was the thing she would come back to later, much later, in the quiet of her dorm room with her study materials untouched and her thoughts entirely somewhere else. The specific fact that it had happened before she had processed it, before she had categorized it. Before Momo Yaoyorozu, who had been categorizing and processing and understanding things faster than any peer since she was 4 years old, had any framework to put it in. She had simply noticed him. And then she had not been able to stop. It happened on the first morning. Not during orientation, not during the dramatic entrance exam footage review that Aizawa showed them as part of the first day briefing. It happened before any of that. In the hallway outside Class 1A, in the specific window of time between arriving and the door opening, when 20 students who had never been in the same room were occupying the same corridor and assessing each other with the careful peripheral vision of people who were too composed to be caught staring. She was not staring. She was observing. There was a distinction. She had been making that distinction since she was 6 years old, when she had first understood that the specific quality of her attention, the complete, analytical, missing-nothing attention that she brought to everything she encountered, made people uncomfortable when they caught it directly. She had learned to angle it, to observe from the side, to collect information without the subject of the collection feeling collected. She was very good at it. He defeated it in approximately 11 seconds. Not deliberately, that was the first thing she understood about him. Nothing he did that morning was deliberate in the self-conscious way. He was standing down the hallway from her with a notebook open in both hands, reading it with the specific intensity of someone who had forgotten they were in a public space. And he turned a page and his eyes moved, and he looked up for just a moment. Not at her specifically, just up, the reflex of someone surfacing briefly from deep concentration, and their eyes met. He smiled. Not the social smile, not the managed, appropriate, meeting a new peer smile that she had been deploying since they arrived, and that everyone around her was deploying with varying degrees of polish. The unguarded one. The smile of someone who had been somewhere interesting in their head and had come up for air and found the world pleasant. It lasted approximately 1 second. He went back to his notebook. She stood in the hallway and felt something she did not immediately have a word for. She was not a person who lacked words. She had been reading since she was 2.5. She had a vocabulary in 4 languages that exceeded most adults. She had precise and articulate language for every subject she had ever encountered. She did not have a word for what happened when he smiled. She filed it under requires further investigation. She was, in this, more like him than she knew. The classroom arranged them by luck of seating, and she ended up 3 rows from him and 2 seats to the right, close enough to observe, far enough that observation did not require any pretense of conversation. This was, she told herself, useful. She could study the other students properly from this position. She could build an accurate picture of the cohort she would be training with. She studied the other students for approximately 4 minutes. Then she studied him. This was not, she recognized with the specific discomfort of someone whose self-awareness was very highly developed, actually about the other students. He was nothing like what she had expected from the entrance exam footage. The footage had shown power, extraordinary power, the specific all-or-nothing output of someone running something enormous through a body that was not yet fully capable of holding it. She had analyzed the footage the night before, the way she analyzed everything, and she had concluded, high power, low control, significant physical cost, unconventional tactical approach, capable, unrefined. She had not analyzed for the notebook. He had one open on his desk before Aizawa finished the first sentence. He was writing in it already. She caught the angle. He was not just taking notes on the class. He was doing something more comprehensive. The page was dense with writing that exceeded the current content of the room. He had arrived with thoughts already in progress. She found this interesting. She found this, if she was being precise, considerably more than interesting. She was a person who lived in her own head, who had, for as long as she could remember, found the interior world of ideas more reliable and more interesting than most of what the exterior world offered, who had been told since she was very young that she was exceptional, and who had processed this information with genuine appreciation and genuine discomfort in equal measure, because exceptional meant different, and different had its own specific weight. She looked at him with his notebook full of thoughts already in progress, and she felt, with the specific recognition of one kind of person encountering another, something she understood before she had words for it. He was also living in his head. Aizawa introduced himself by lying on the floor in a sleeping bag. and telling them to change into their gym clothes in 3 minutes, and anyone who asked a question about the instruction would be sent home. She processed this as an assessment of adaptability and compliance under unconditional instruction, and she had already changed before the 3-minute mark. He had changed with 20 seconds to spare. He had been writing until 25 seconds before the deadline. She filed this away. The quirk assessment apprehension test was the first real data. She did well. She knew she would do well, not from arrogance, from accurate self-assessment. Her quirk allowed her to produce any object whose composition she understood, which meant her test performance was bounded only by her knowledge and her creativity, rather than by any single fixed output. She had spent years building her knowledge specifically because it was the limiting factor of her ability. She had the highest theoretical grounding in her graduating class from the middle school program she had attended. She placed second overall. She watched him place last. He had pushed his body past its limit on every single test. She had seen the X-ray images of what One for All did to its holder's body when applied without sufficient control. She had done research. She always did research. And she had watched him break his finger on the ball throw and keep going. And she had felt something in her chest that she later, more honestly, acknowledged was not entirely clinical concern. She had been concerned. That part was accurate. She had also been unable to look away. Aizawa declared he was expelling the lowest-scoring student, and then revealed he was not because it had been a logical ruse, and she watched that revelation land on everyone around her, and she also watched it land on him specifically, the specific relief of someone who had been braced for the worst and had not gotten it. The relief on his face did something to her. She wrote about it that night in her study journal, which she had kept since she was 7 and which was the most honest document she produced because it was the only one nobody read. She wrote, "Today I met a person who pushes themselves past the point of reasonable output in pursuit of something they believe in. I do not know yet what they believe in. I find I am interested in finding out." She was being careful with her words. She was already being careful, already managing the specific quality of what she had noticed, already applying the analytical framework that kept her functional and precise and appropriately composed. She was 16 years old and she had met someone that morning for 11 seconds of eye contact and one unguarded smile, and she was already, at the end of the first day, managing how she wrote about it. She noticed she was managing it. She filed that under, also requires further investigation. The first real conversation happened on the 3rd day. Not because she arranged it. She had not arranged it. She was not the kind of person who arranged things for non-academic reasons, who engineered social situations, who moved towards something she had not yet categorized as safe to move toward. She was the kind of person who observed from the correct distance until she had sufficient data. She had not had sufficient data. He had come to her. The practical exercise in the afternoon had required working in pairs on a task assessment, and the pairing had been assigned rather than chosen, and she had ended up across from him at a workstation with a written brief and 40 minutes. He had read the brief and immediately opened his notebook. She had read the brief and immediately reached for her materials. They had both stopped simultaneously. They had looked at each other across the workstation. He had said, "You're analyzing before you execute." She had said, "So are you." He had looked at the notebook. He had looked at her. Something in his face had done something that she would spend the next week finding accurate language for. "I have 15 notebooks," he said, "on heroes, quirks, tactical applications, everything." He paused. "People usually tell me that's too many notebooks." "I have 11 study journals," she said, "academic, tactical, compositional, and 3 specialized research tracks." She paused. "People usually tell me I work too hard." He looked at her with an expression she would also spend time finding language for. "The brief says 40 minutes, he said. "I think we can do this in 20 if we split the analytical load." "I was thinking 25, she said. "The third component has a variable I want to account for." "Which variable?" She told him. He wrote it in his notebook, not the notation of someone recording an instruction, the notation of someone who had found something genuinely useful and wanted to make sure they kept it. She watched him write it and felt something that was warm and precise and located somewhere that was not her head. They did it in 19 minutes. Afterward, he looked at the result and then at her with the expression she was accumulating data on. "Yaoyorozu-san," he said, "your analytical approach is really, I mean, the way you break down the variable conditions is." He stopped. He seemed to be having a problem with the sentence. "I have a note about it," he said finally, "in my notebook." "You have a note about me," she said. About your quirk application methodology, he said. From the assessment test, the way you calculated the optimal ball weight before throwing it was, he stopped again. I'm not explaining this well. You noticed my approach during the assessment, she said. I notice everything, he said, in a tone that was not boastful but simply factual. I have 15 notebooks. He paused. The note about you is 4 pages. She looked at him. He appeared to realize what he had said. The expression shifted into something she was more practiced at reading, the specific alarm of someone who has been more transparent than intended. For research purposes, he said. Of course, she said. They looked at each other. I have a note about you too, she said, in my study journal. How many pages, he said. She did not answer immediately. She considered the various responses available and selected the honest one because she was, fundamentally, someone who defaulted to honesty when other options required sustained energy to maintain. 2, she said, so far. Something happened in his expression. So far, he said. I add to my entries when new data becomes available, she said. He looked at her for a moment that was slightly longer than the situation required. I'll probably add to mine too, he said. She returned to her study journal that evening and added 3 more pages. She was being less careful. The second week brought the villain attack on the USJ. She had always prepared. Preparation was the mechanism by which she converted anxiety into function. And when the attack happened, she moved with the specific focused clarity of someone whose preparation had given her a foundation to stand on when the ground became unstable. She did what she could. She created what was needed. She worked through the crisis with the competence she had spent her life building toward moments like this. She also, in the corners of her awareness that the crisis did not fully occupy, tracked him. Not strategically, she was not deploying him as a tactical resource. She was not calculating his position for coordination purposes. She was watching him the way she had been watching him for 2 weeks, with the specific helpless attention of someone who had discovered they were incapable of not watching a particular person and had not yet fully admitted this to themselves. He was extraordinary. Not in the way she had analyzed from the footage, not just the power, though the power was extraordinary, in the way that he made decisions. She watched him calculate in real time, watched him weigh the safety of one person against the safety of many and reach conclusions that were not always tactically optimal, but were always morally coherent. She watched him hurt himself without hesitation for the people around him, and she watched him not notice that it should have been remarkable. He thought it was just what you did. She had grown up with every advantage, the best education, the most comprehensive training, the specific gifts that wealth and attention and resources had provided to a child who had the capacity to use all of them fully. She had been prepared for heroism the way you prepared for an examination, thoroughly, systematically, with every available resource deployed. He had been prepared by wanting it completely. She stood in the aftermath of the USJ and she looked at him across the space, hurt, supporting someone else's weight despite being hurt, still processing, still thinking, still the person he had been before the crisis began, and she felt something so large and so specific and so entirely honest that she could not manage it into something smaller. She tried anyway. She wrote about it that night in the study journal as clinical observation of crisis response methodology. She added 7 pages. She was not managing it. The sports festival arrived. She had prepared for it the way she prepared for everything, with comprehensive strategy and honest self-assessment, and the full deployment of every resource available to her. She knew what she could do, and she knew how to do it most effectively, and she had analyzed the likely approaches of her cohort with enough accuracy that she was not surprised by most of what happened. She was surprised by him. Not his power. She had expected his power, had been tracking its development, had noted the specific incremental improvements in control that suggested someone working on the problem seriously. She was surprised by the moment in the cavalry battle when he was down to almost nothing and he found something anyway. Not a quirk, not a technique. Something more fundamental, the specific refusal of someone who had decided that stopping was not one of the options, who had reached the point where the realistic assessment said this is not achievable, and had declined the assessment. She had watched him decline the realistic assessment and keep going. She had felt, watching that, something that she recognized from the internal architecture of her own relationship to her abilities, the specific quality of someone who used knowledge and preparation as the mechanism for refusing to quit. She prepared because preparation was what she had instead of the raw instinct he had instead of preparation. They were approaching the same refusal from different directions. She had not known anyone else who was reaching the same thing. She wrote 12 pages that night. She stopped pretending they were clinical observations on page 4. The honest pages were the best ones, the ones where she stopped managing the language and simply wrote what she found. She found that she had been watching him for 3 weeks with the specific attention she gave to things she was trying to understand because she had decided they were worth understanding completely. She found that the note in her study journal had grown from 2 pages to 31 pages, and that the 31 pages were not notes on his quirk application methodology. They were notes on him. The way he apologized for things he did not need to apologize for. The way he treated the people around him with the specific quality of attention that assumed everyone was worth the full version of it. The way he laughed, she had seen him laugh twice, both times at something small, and both times it was the entire thing, the completely unmanaged laugh of someone who found the world genuinely funny rather than performing amusement. The way he carried his notebooks everywhere, and wrote in them with the urgency of someone for whom ideas were perishable things that needed capturing before they were lost. She wrote, "He is the most genuinely earnest person I have ever met." She wrote, "I do not mean this as a simple observation." She wrote, "I have been trying for 3 weeks to make this simpler than it is, and I cannot." She wrote, "I think, and I am writing this with the full awareness that I may be wrong, that I have limited data, that feelings are not the same as conclusions. I think I have been paying attention to Midoriya Izumi since the first morning in the hallway, because something in me recognized something in him and wanted to understand it." She looked at that. She wrote, "I think wanting to understand it is not the complete truth." She wrote, "I think I wanted to be near it." She closed the journal. She sat at her desk in the dorm room in the quiet of late evening, and she felt the specific weight of having been honest with herself about something she had been managing for 3 weeks. It was heavier than she expected. It was also, in a way she did not yet have precise language for, a relief. She opened the journal again. She wrote, "She notices things about people. I have watched her notice things. I have watched her write them down. I wonder if she has noticed me." She looked at that. She wrote, "I wonder if I want her to." She thought about the 4 pages in his notebook from the entrance exam, the 19 minutes on the 3rd day, the way he had said "so far." She thought about the way he had smiled in the hallway before she had any framework to put it in. She wrote, "I think I do want her to." She closed the journal. She went to the window. The UA campus was quiet in the way it was never fully quiet, the hum of infrastructure, the distant sound of other students, the specific quality of a place that was always in some form of motion, even when still. She was 17 years old. She had 31 pages about a person she had met 3 weeks ago, and a study journal that had become something different from what it had been before the first day of school, and a feeling she had stopped managing about 20 minutes ago. She stood at the window and she let herself feel it at the correct volume. It was large. She thought, "I do not know what to do with large." Then she thought, "I know what to do with large. I study it. I understand it. I build a complete picture of it from every available angle." She thought, "I have 31 pages. I am building the picture." She thought, "The picture is very clear already." She went back to her desk. She opened the journal to a new page. She wrote at the top, "What I actually know." She wrote, "I know that I have been paying attention to Midoriya Izumi since the first morning with the specific quality of attention I give to things I find genuinely important. I know that 31 pages of notes is not analytical observation. I know that watching her refuse the realistic assessment in the cavalry battle produced a feeling in me that I recognize as the specific warmth of understanding someone. I know that 19 minutes and so far and 4 pages from the entrance exam are things I have thought about repeatedly for 3 weeks. I know that when I said 2 pages so far I knew I was going to add to it, and I felt something about that I was not honest about in the moment." She wrote, "I know that I am Momo Yaoyorozu. I have been called gifted and exceptional and extraordinary since I was 4 years old. I have been prepared for everything. I have a study journal with 11 tracks and a compositional quirk that requires comprehensive knowledge to function, and I have been ready for every examination I have ever faced." She wrote, "I have not been ready for this." She looked at that. She smiled. It was small, the specific private smile of someone who has found something unexpected in territory they thought they knew completely. She wrote, "I find I do not mind." She closed the journal. She sat in the quiet of her room. The first month of UA was behind her, and she was different than she had been at the start of it, and the difference had a specific shape she could trace precisely to one morning in a hallway and 11 seconds, and one unguarded smile. She was going to need more pages. She was already looking forward to filling them. The problem with 31 pages was that they became 43. She had not planned for 43. She had not planned for any of it, had not planned for the way the second month at UA moved faster than the first, the way training intensified and the coursework deepened, and the specific reality of what they were all becoming started to have weight that orientation week had only suggested. She had not planned for the way that accelerating context seemed to accelerate everything, including the thing she had been trying to hold at the pace of careful investigation. The thing was not cooperating with careful investigation. It had its own pace. She discovered this on a Monday morning, when she arrived at the classroom 8 minutes before the start of class, because she was always 8 minutes early, and found only one other person there. He looked up from his notebook. She sat down. "You're early," he said. "I'm always early," she said. "I know," he said. "I've been tracking the pattern." She looked at him. He said this the way he said most things, with complete sincerity and zero awareness that sincerity at this specific level of detail was unusual. He had been tracking her arrival pattern. He had noted it enough times to identify it as a pattern. This information was now being shared with her directly as if it were completely normal. "You've been tracking my arrival time," she said. "It's an 8-minute window," he said, "consistent across all observed days except the Tuesday after the USJ when you were 6 minutes early, which I think was the adrenaline adjustment after a crisis event. I have a note about it." She looked at her hands. She thought 44 pages. "I notice things," he said. He had said this before. It continued to be true in ways she was accumulating evidence for daily. "I have notes on everyone for hero analysis purposes. Understanding how people operate is..." He stopped. He looked at his notebook. "You've been coming in at 8 minutes consistently because you're the kind of person who doesn't like surprises, and having the room settle around you rather than arriving to a room that's already in motion is..." He stopped again. "I'm over-explaining." "No," she said. He looked at her. "You're not," she said. "Continue." He looked at her for a moment with the expression she had been building a complete catalogue of. This one she had categorized as recalibrating, the expression of someone who had expected a different response and was adjusting. "You arrive early," he said more carefully, "because the extra minutes create a controlled variable in an environment that you don't have full control over yet. The classroom is new. The people are new. The 8 minutes is how you make it yours before it fills up." Silent. She felt something in her chest with a specific and identifiable quality. "That is," she said, "the most accurate observation anyone has made about me in recent memory." He did not look proud of this. He looked attentive, like the accuracy was the point and his own role in achieving it was irrelevant. "You do the same thing differently," she said, because honesty had momentum and she was already in it. "You're always here first, not 8 minutes, 20, and you're in your notebook before you've fully settled into the chair. The classroom doesn't exist yet when you're that far into whatever you're working on." He looked at her, he looked at his notebook, he looked at her again. "You noticed that," he said. "I notice things," she said. The space between them had a specific quality she did not have precise language for. She was working on the language. It was taking longer than her vocabulary usually required. "I have 44 pages now," she said. She had not planned to say that. He went very still. "In your journal," he said. "Yes," she said. "About my research into the cohort," she said, which was the managed version. She heard herself say it and she heard the management in it, and she thought about the honest pages of the journal and she said, "Primarily about you." The classroom door opened behind her. Other students began filing in. The 8 minutes ended. The day began. He had not responded. She did not look back at him. She opened her materials. She felt her heart doing something that exceeded normal resting parameters. She added page 45 in her head. The unforeseen simulation joint, the USJ, had changed things in ways she was still calculating. Not tactically. She had done the tactical analysis thoroughly and filed it with the precision it deserved. She meant internally. The specific thing that happened to people when they had been in genuine danger together for the first time and had survived it. She had been in difficult situations before. The training at the program she had attended before UA had been rigorous and occasionally frightening, and always controlled. The USJ had not been controlled. The USJ had been real in the specific way that things were real when the consequences were not theoretical. She had performed competently. She was certain of that. Her quirk had allowed her to contribute meaningfully, and she had maintained functional clarity throughout. She had also been afraid. Not the managed version, the real version. the specific quality of fear that existed when the stakes exceeded what preparation had accounted for. She wrote about this in the study journal honestly. She wrote, "I was afraid and I kept working. I do not know if those two things happening simultaneously makes me brave or simply functional. I suspect the answer depends on what the word brave is actually for." She wrote, "I watched her be afraid and keep working too. I watched her calculate under genuine pressure and make decisions that were not perfect, but were real and committed, and came from caring about the people around her rather than from any tactical framework." She wrote, "I think I understand now why she fills so many notebooks. The notebooks are how she cares about things. She writes everything down because writing it down is how she makes it real enough to act on. The notebook is the mechanism between the feeling and the function." She looked at that. She wrote, "My study journal is the same thing." She looked at that too. She closed the journal. She sat with the specific weight of having found something true she had not expected to find. The practical exercises became the structure of the weeks. Regular, demanding, designed with the specific intention of revealing gaps, not to shame the students who had them, but to give them something to work toward. She appreciated the philosophy. She had grown up in educational environments that treated gaps as failures. Aizawa's framework treated them as data. She had gaps. This was uncomfortable to acknowledge. She had been exceptional for so long that the specific discomfort of not being immediately at the top of every metric was something she had not fully trained her relationship with. She worked on it the way she worked on everything, honestly, systematically, without pretending the discomfort was not there. She was in the training room one afternoon, working on a specific application gap, when she heard footsteps. She did not look up. She was in the middle of a production sequence that required precise concentration. "Your left shoulder drops before a large volume creation," he said, "about 3 centimeters. I've been watching it happen across the last 4 sessions." She finished the sequence. She turned. He was standing at the edge of the training area with his notebook open. He had the expression of someone who had said something and was now waiting to see if they had overstepped. "You've been watching my technique across 4 sessions," she said. "I watch everyone's technique," he said. "For analysis, I have notes on." "Show me," she said. He turned the notebook. The page was dense with observations. Not just the shoulder, the timing of her production relative to her breathing, the specific categories of item where her composition was most efficient, the patterns she returned to under pressure, 3 observations about her decision-making process in variable situations. All of it accurate, all of it more detailed than any external observer had ever provided her. She read it twice. "This is from 4 sessions," she said. "Yes," he said. "You took this level of notes on my technique from observing me during your own training sessions," she said. "I take notes on everyone," he said. He was watching her expression carefully. "It's not," he stopped. "I find your approach particularly interesting. The way you sequence the composition decisions, the way you assess weight and material requirements in real time. He stopped again. "Tell me," she said. He looked at the notebook. "It's like watching someone think," he said. "Externally, your quirk makes your decision-making process visible in a way that most quirks don't. Every object you create is a record of a choice you made. I can look at your output and understand how you're thinking." He paused. "I find that remarkable." She was very still. "Nobody has described my quirk that way before," she said. "How do they describe it?" "In terms of output range," she said. "What I can create, what I cannot, the materials library." She paused. "They describe what it does, not what it is." He looked at her. "What it is," he said slowly, "is a mind made physical. Every object you create is a thought you had. The creation is the thought." He turned the notebook page. "I have 3 pages on this specifically, if you want to read them." She reached out and took the notebook. She read the 3 pages. She handed it back. She said, "I owe you an apology." He looked confused. "For what?" "For underestimating the depth of your analytical approach based on your entrance exam," she said. "The power was apparent. This was not. I should not have made conclusions from incomplete data." He looked at her with the expression she had not yet fully categorized. The one she was beginning to think existed only in specific contexts, only in the specific configuration of this conversation, only in the space between the two of them. "Most people make conclusions from incomplete data about me," he said. "It's usually the opposite direction." "I know," she said. "I've watched it happen." She paused. "It frustrates me." He went still again. In the specific way he went still when something landed on him that he had not been braced for. "It frustrates you," he said, "when people underestimate me." Yes, she said, simply, without the management. He looked at her for a long moment. I have, he said carefully, a note about that too. She felt the warmth in her chest expand in the specific direction it had been expanding since the hallway on the first morning. What does the note say? She said. He closed the notebook. I haven't finished writing it yet, he said. She thought about 45 pages. Neither have I, she said. The class trip to the forest training camp was the first time they spent sustained time in the same environment, without the structure of the classroom creating the shape of their interactions. She had prepared for the camp. She had done physical conditioning above the standard requirement and had spent 2 weeks expanding her materials library for wilderness-relevant compositions and had prepared contingency plans for the categories of incident most likely to occur in an outdoor training environment. She had not prepared for 3 days of proximity. The camp revealed things that the classroom managed. The classroom had structure, assigned seats, lesson progression, the specific formality of an educational environment that created helpful scaffolding for interactions. The camp had none of this. The camp had fire building and group meals, and the specific loose social configuration of people in an unfamiliar environment together, which produced conversations and arrangements and a kind of candor that the classroom did not. She was not prepared for candor. She was not prepared for the evening of the second day when the group had finished the training session and had been given free time before dinner, and she had gone to the edge of the camp to review her notes and found him already there. He was not writing. This was unusual enough to notice. He was sitting at the edge of the overlook with his notebook in his lap and his pen not moving, and he was looking at the forest below with an expression she had not seen before in her catalogue. She sat near him, not beside him exactly, near. He noticed but did not adjust. You're not writing, she said. I'm thinking, he said. Sometimes I run out of pages before I run out of thoughts. What are you thinking about? He was quiet for a moment. Whether I'm enough, he said, for this, for everything it's going to require. He paused. I know what I want. I've always known what I want. I'm less certain about the gap between wanting and being. She looked at him. She thought about every exceptional person she had ever met and the specific private fear that lived in all of them. The fear that the thing they were supposed to be was larger than the thing they currently were. She had that fear. She had always had that fear. She had a system for it, the study journal, the preparation, the comprehensive framework of becoming more capable as a strategy for closing the gap. The gap is not a flaw, she said, it is a direction. He turned to look at her. The distance between what you are and what you want to be, she said, is only a problem if you treat it as evidence that you cannot close it. If you treat it as information about the distance you need to travel, it becomes the structure of the work. She paused. You know what work is. You have 15 notebooks. He looked at her for a long time. You do that, he said. Do what? Take a thing that feels like a weight and give it a mechanism, he said. Make it operational. Make it something you can work on instead of something that just sits there. He paused. I've noticed it. In class, in training, you have a framework for everything. The framework is how I function, she said honestly. Does it ever not work, he said. She thought about 45 pages. She thought about 3 weeks of trying to categorize something that was declining to be categorized. Recently, she said, I have encountered something that is not fully cooperating with the framework. He looked at her with the specific expression she had been cataloging all month. What is it? He said. She looked at the forest. She thought about honesty and what it cost. She thought about the study journal and the 45 pages and the 8 minutes in the morning and the notebook full of observations about her shoulder and the 3 pages about her quirk being a mind made physical. She thought about what it meant to have been seen that specifically for 1 month by someone who had 15 notebooks and a 4-page entry from the entrance exam. She thought, I have been managing this for 6 weeks, and the management is not working, and I am Momo Yaoyorozu, and I do not do things that are not working without addressing the reason. She turned to look at him. You, she said. 1 word. Honest, simple, the management entirely absent. The forest was quiet around them. He looked at her with all the expressions she had catalogued, and one she had not seen before, one she did not have a name for yet, one that was going to require a new page. He opened his notebook. He turned to the section she now knew was the entry that had started as 4 pages. He turned it toward her. She looked at the pages. They were not 4 pages anymore. She counted. 19 pages. dense with the specific handwriting she had been observing for 6 weeks, the handwriting that changed when he was writing something that mattered, that became more deliberate, that pressed harder on the page. The entry was titled, Yaoyorozu Momo, Ongoing. She read the first line. She read, "The most precise person I have ever met, and the most precise is not about accuracy. It is about the quality of attention she brings to everything, the specific way she makes the world around her more real, by paying attention to it completely." She looked up. He was watching her read with the expression that did not have a name yet. "Ongoing," she said. "Yes," he said. "How long have you been adding to it?" "Since the entrance exam footage," he said. "Before I met you," he paused. "I had already noticed how you thought from the footage. I wanted to understand it. And then I met you and," he stopped. "And," she said. "And the entry stopped being about your quirk methodology," he said. She thought about 45 pages. She thought about the study journal shifting somewhere around week 2, from clinical observation to something she had not had precise language for, until she found it in herself. "Mine did too," she said, "around week 2. He looked at her. She looked at him. The forest was quiet, and the light was the specific quality of late afternoon, and they were sitting at the edge of an overlook at a training camp. They had both prepared for incomprehensive detail, and neither of them had prepared for this. She did not mind. She found she had not minded for 6 weeks. She said, "I have 45 pages." He said, "I have 19. She said, "You started earlier, you should have more." He said, "Quality over quantity." She laughed. The real one, the unguarded one. The specific quality of laugh that happened when something was genuinely funny and her composure had no purchase on it. He looked at her laugh with an expression she was going to need a new section in the study journal for. She collected herself. She said, "I don't know what to do with this." "Neither do I," he said honestly. "I've been trying to figure it out for 6 weeks. I have 3 pages specifically on the question of what to do with it. And the pages are inconclusive," he said. She smiled, the small private one. "Then we are both working with incomplete conclusions," she said. "Yes," he said. "I find," she said carefully, "that I prefer that to having the conclusion without the process." He looked at her. "The process is what you study," he said. "Yes," she said, "the process is what I study." He turned a page in the notebook. He wrote something. He turned it toward her. He had written, "Then we keep going." She looked at it. She reached over. She took the pen. She wrote under his sentence, "Yes." She handed it back. He looked at what she had written. He closed the notebook. They sat at the edge of the overlook in the specific quiet of 2 people who had arrived at something real from opposite directions and found it exactly where both of them were standing. The forest was gold in the late light. She was 17 years old, and she had 45 pages and an ongoing entry in someone else's notebook, and a feeling she had stopped managing 4 minutes ago, and a direction that felt, for the first time in 6 weeks, not like something to investigate but like something to simply be in. She was in it. She looked at the forest. She thought, "I was not prepared for this." She thought, "I find I do not need to have been." He opened the notebook again. He wrote page 20. She smiled. She opened her study journal. She wrote page 46. They sat in the forest, and the light was warm, and somewhere behind them their classmates were making noise, and the camp was alive with the specific energy of people, becoming more than they had been. She was becoming something she did not have a study track for. She was finding this was exactly the right thing to be becoming. She wrote one more line. She wrote, "This is what ongoing looks like." She closed the journal. She sat in the warmth and the light and the ongoing. She did not need more language than that. Not today. Today was enough. Today was everything. The forest remembered that evening. She did not know how she knew that. It was not a precise thought, not the kind of observation she could write in the study journal with clean language and clear sourcing. It was the specific quality of a moment that felt, while it was happening, like something that was going to stay, like the air itself was making a record of it. 2 people at the edge of an overlook with notebooks in their laps and one word written between them. Yes. She thought about that word on the walk back to camp. She thought about it during dinner, which she ate with her usual composure, and which tasted like nothing in particular because her attention was entirely elsewhere. She thought about it in the dormitory that night when the camp sounds faded into the quiet of late hours, and she was alone with the study journal and the specific weight of what the day had added to it. She wrote for a long time. Not the managed version, not the framework. She wrote the honest version, the version that had been accumulating since the first morning and which had, at the overlook in the late light, run out of room to be anything other than what it was. She wrote, "I said his name and what I meant was you. I said you and what I meant was everything I have been writing for 6 weeks without the correct word for it. I said you and he showed me 19 pages, and the first line of those pages was the most accurately true thing anyone has ever written about me, and I want to examine how that is possible. I want to trace the mechanism of it. I want to understand how someone who has known me for 6 weeks produced 19 pages that understood me more precisely than people who have known me my whole life." She paused. She wrote, "I think the answer is that he was paying attention from the beginning. The way I was paying attention from the beginning. We were both watching. We were both writing. We were doing the same thing in the same direction, and neither of us had named it." She wrote, "I have named it now." She closed the journal. She lay in the dark of the camp dormitory, and she felt the name she had given it sit in her chest like something that had found its correct location after a long time of being placed incorrectly everywhere else. She slept well for the first time in 6 weeks. The return from camp was not the resolution she might have written if she were writing a story rather than living one. Life did not produce clean resolutions. Life produced the return of regular schedule and the weight of coursework and the specific ongoing reality of being students at UA in a year that was becoming progressively more serious about preparing them for what came after. What had happened at the Overlook was real. What had happened at the Overlook did not immediately change the architecture of daily life. She understood this. She was a person who understood mechanisms, who knew that real things needed time and context, and the specific accumulation of ordinary days to become the full version of themselves. She was patient. She had been patient since before she had language for patience. She was also 17 years old, and she had said you, and he had shown her 19 pages, and she was finding patience required more active maintenance than usual. The first week back was ordinary on the surface, and not ordinary underneath. The classroom was the same. The 8 minutes were the same. He was in his notebook before he had fully settled into his chair. She arrived to find the room not yet full, and the specific quality of the 20 minutes before class began slightly charged in a way it had not been charged before the camp. They did not talk about the Overlook directly. This was not avoidance. She had thought carefully about the distinction between avoidance and pace, and she had concluded that what they were doing was pace. The specific deliberate movement of two people who had arrived at something real and were choosing to let it develop at the speed that was correct for it rather than the speed that urgency suggested. She had written 3 pages about this distinction. They talked about other things. The coursework, the training, the hero analysis that he was always willing to discuss with a depth that matched hers and sometimes exceeded it. The specific topics that lived in the intersection of her materials, knowledge and his quirk mechanics research, and which produced conversations that ran long and generated more notebook pages for both of them. They talked about fears once. This happened on a Thursday after training when they had both stayed late in the gym, and the room was empty, and the specific quality of empty rooms in the late evening produced a candor that busier contexts did not. She had been working on a precision application, and he had been on the other side of the room working on control calibration, and they had both stopped at approximately the same time and sat on the gym floor, and she had said, without planning to, "Do you think about what happens if you're not enough?" He had looked at her. "All the time," he said. "How do you manage it?" she said. He thought about it. "I write it down," he said, "and then I work on whatever the note identified as the gap." He paused. "The fear doesn't go away, but having a note about it makes it specific rather than general. General fear is hard to work on. Specific fear has a direction." She thought about this. "I do the same thing," she said. "Different format, same mechanism." "The study journal," he said. "Yes." He leaned his head back against the gym wall. "What are you afraid of specifically?" he said. "Right now, this week." She considered the managed answer. She considered the framework answer. She thought about 19 pages and 1 word written between them. "Performing," she said, "instead of being. There is a version of me that I produce for contexts because it is what the context requires. I am afraid of not knowing when I am performing and when I am being." He looked at her. "I don't think you're performing right now," he said. I know, she said, that's the only place I'm certain. He held her gaze. Right now is enough, he said. The places where you're certain, you build from there. She thought about 45 pages becoming 62 pages. She thought about the places where she had been certain. The gym floor the day they did the exercise in 19 minutes. The overlook. The Thursday evenings in the empty training room that had begun to have their own specific quality, their own texture, their own place in the architecture of the week. What are you afraid of? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Being given something I don't deserve, he said, and not knowing it until I've already failed it. He looked at his hands, the hands she had watched carry the cost of one for all through 2 months of training, marked with the specific evidence of someone who pushed past reasonable limit regularly. One for all was given to me. I didn't earn it the way other people earn their quirks. I just received it, and I've been trying to become someone who deserved receiving it ever since. She looked at his hands. She thought about the first line of his 19 pages. The most precise person I have ever met, and the most precise is not about accuracy. It is about the quality of attention she brings to everything, the specific way she makes the world around her more real by paying attention to it completely. She said, I think the deserving is not the point. He looked at her. The point, she said, is what you do with what you have. You have one for all, you have 15 notebooks. You have the specific quality of someone who does not stop when stopping would be easier. She paused. I have known you for 2 months. That is already enough data to conclude that the deserving is not in question. He looked at her for a very long time. You do that, he said. The mechanism thing, you take a weight and make it operational. I told you at the camp, she said, it's how I function. I know, he said, I find it. He stopped. He opened his notebook. He wrote something. He turned it toward her. He had written, I find it the most useful thing I have ever been given. She looked at that. She felt the warmth in her chest, with the full volume that she had stopped managing 6 weeks ago, and had never started managing again. She reached over and took the pen. She wrote under his sentence, I find you the same. She handed it back. He read what she had written. He closed the notebook. The gym was quiet around them. Momo, he said. Her name, not Yaoyorozu-san. Her name, in the specific register of someone who had decided to mean it. She looked at him. I don't know how to do this, he said. I have notes on it. I have 3 pages specifically on what I would say if I was saying it directly, and none of the pages are adequate because the pages are notes and this, he gestured at the space between them. This is the actual thing, not notes on the actual thing. I know, she said. I have been, he stopped, he started again. Since the first morning, in the hallway before we had spoken, you were in my notebook before class started. 4 pages from the entrance exam footage, she said. You know about those. You told me on the 3rd day, she said. You have told me many things without noticing you were telling me. He looked at her with the expression that still did not have a complete name. What did they tell you, he said. That you pay attention to things you find worth paying attention to, she said. That you found me worth it before we spoke. She paused. I find I have felt the same since the first morning, since you smiled in the hallway before you knew I was watching. You were watching, he said. I observe, she said. There's a distinction. There is not, he said. She almost smiled. There is not, she agreed. He looked at her with everything in his face at once. The earnestness and the uncertainty, and the thing underneath both of those that she had 45 pages, then 62 pages, now 71 pages trying to name. I don't want to get this wrong, he said. You are the most. He opened his notebook. He closed it again. The pages are better than this. You don't need the pages, she said. I always need the pages, he said. Not for this, she said. For this you have the thing itself, not notes on the thing, the thing. She held his gaze. I am here, you are here. That is the actual thing, not the analysis of it. He looked at her. He said, I care about you, specifically, precisely, in the way I care about things I have decided are worth every page I have. He said it simply, without the management that she had been watching him apply to adjacent things for weeks. I have been caring about you since October, and I have been writing about it instead of saying it, because the saying felt like something I needed to earn first. She felt the warmth at full volume. You have earned nothing, she said. There was nothing to earn. There has only been 2 people paying attention to each other from the beginning and arriving at the same place from different notebooks. She paused. I care about you, specifically, precisely, with 45 pages of evidence that became 71 pages of evidence because the thing kept being larger than the previous entry accounted for. He looked at her. She looked at him. The gym floor was not a remarkable location. It was not the overlook at the camp. It was not anywhere she would have chosen if she were writing the story rather than living it. It was fluorescent lights and training equipment, and the specific smell of a room that had held a lot of effort. It was where they were. It was enough. He said, "Can I show you something?" He opened the notebook to the ongoing entry. He turned past 19 pages. He had been adding. She could see the handwriting changing as the pages went on. The earliest entries had the quality of observation. The middle entries had the quality of analysis. The later entries had the quality of something else entirely. He turned to the most recent page. He handed her the notebook. She read. He had written, "I have been trying to find the correct word for what this is since October, and I have concluded that the correct word does not exist in my vocabulary or possibly in any vocabulary because what this is specific. It is not a category. It is her, the specific fact of her. The way she arrived 8 minutes early on the first day and every day since, and the way she makes the world more precise by being in it, and the way she said you at the overlook, and meant everything she had been not quite saying for 6 weeks, and the way she takes a weight and makes it directional, and the way she reads what I write, and understands it more fully than I understood it when I wrote it. I do not have a word for the specific fact of her. I think the specific fact of her is its own word. I think the word is Momo." She looked up from the notebook. He was watching her read with the expression that was going to require an entirely new section of the study journal. She handed the notebook back. She said, "You used my name." "Yes," he said. "In the entry," she said, "you stopped using Yaoyorozu." "Around week 5, he said, "in the private entries, the ones that stopped being about quirk methodology." She thought about week 5. She thought about her own journal and the week she had stopped calling him Midoriya-kun in the entries and had written simply, him. "I have the same week," she said. "I know," he said, "I suspected." She looked at him across the gym floor, with everything she had accumulated across 3 months of careful, and then not careful attention. She said, "Izumi." His name, the first time, in the specific register that names carried when they were finally said with what they meant. He looked at her with something entirely new. She said, "I would like to keep adding pages to both of our entries for a long time." He said, "Yes." One word. The same word she had written at the overlook. The word that had started this and was now continuing it into whatever came next. She smiled. The full one, the one she produced for almost no one, the one that existed below the composure and the framework, and the 16 years of exceptional that had taught her to manage her expressions with the same precision she managed everything else. He looked at her smile with the expression she did not have a name for yet. She thought, "I am going to need a new section." The months that followed were the best months of her life. She would write that in the study journal and look at it and not take it back because it was accurate, and she had committed to accuracy even in the honest pages. She had grown up with every advantage, the education, the resources, the specific gifts of a family that had invested completely in what she was capable of becoming. She had had good months before, fine months, productive months. These were different. These were the months where her study journal acquired a new track, not academic, not tactical, not compositional. She titled it, with the specific precision she brought to everything, ongoing, because that was the word he had used, and because it was accurate, and because some things were best named by the quality of their continuation rather than their category. The ongoing track filled quickly. It filled with Tuesdays, which had become the evening they consistently ended up in the library, not by arrangement, but by the accumulated habit of 2 people whose study schedules had independently arrived at the same time and location, and who had never adjusted them. She would arrive to find him already there, notebook open, and she would sit across from him, and they would work in the specific shared quiet of people who did not need to fill silence, because the silence was already full. It filled with the small things. He brought her reference materials she had not asked for but needed. He had read something in his own research and thought of her application gap, and written it in his notebook with her name in the margin. She created small practical objects for him without being asked because she had observed the gaps in his equipment and filled them as a matter of course. They had, without planning it, become each other's research assistants. It filled with conversations that started in one place and ended somewhere else entirely, about heroism and what it required, about fear and what it was for, about the specific weight of being exceptional in a world that used exceptional as a category rather than a description, about notebooks and what it meant to write things down. "Why do you write everything?" she asked him once. "Because I forget things I don't write," he said, "not the facts, the texture, the specific way something felt or looked or made me think, He paused. Writing keeps things from becoming just memories, it keeps them accurate. She had written about this. She had written, he writes to preserve the texture of things. I study to understand the mechanism of things. We are both trying to keep things from becoming less than they are. We are going about it from the same direction. It filled with the hard things too. The year was not easy. UA did not produce easy years. It produced years that asked everything, and then found what happened when everything was given. There were missions that went wrong and training days that exceeded what she had prepared for, and nights when the study journal held things she could not say to anyone else. One night she wrote, I am afraid I am not brave enough. The knowledge is reliable. The technique is reliable. But bravery is not a technique, and it is not knowledge, and I do not know how to study it, and I am not sure I have it. She showed it to him the next day. She did not plan to. She had shown him things from the journal before, the analytical entries, the framework pages, but not the honest pages. The honest pages were the most private document she produced. She showed him anyway. He read it. He opened his notebook, and he wrote something, and he slid it across the table. He had written, you showed me the page. You showed me the honest page, which is the most private thing you write. You were afraid of not being brave enough, and you showed me anyway. That is bravery, not the absence of fear, the movement towards something true despite it. She had read that in the library on a Tuesday evening with her study materials untouched, and she had felt something in her chest that she had stopped trying to name, and simply let be whatever it was. She wrote under his note, you always make it operational. He wrote under that, you taught me that. She had written about that exchange for 4 pages. He had written about it too. She knew because he told her, and because she had begun to know his handwriting well enough to see the entries that were about things she recognized. They did not keep secrets from each other. Not strategically. It had not been a decision. It was the specific quality of 2 people who had started by writing about each other in separate notebooks, and had ended up writing in the same notebooks, passing them back and forth across library tables and gym floors and the overlook at the camp they returned to for the second-year curriculum. The second camp overlook was different from the first. The first had been the beginning. The second was the middle of something that had no visible end. She sat at the edge of it in the same late afternoon light, and he was beside her. Actually beside her this time, not near but beside. The distance collapsed by a year of accumulating ordinary days, and she had her study journal, and he had his notebook, and they were both writing. She looked at what she was writing. She had been writing about the view, about the quality of the light, about the specific way this place felt different now that it had history, now that it was the place where something real had started rather than just an overlook at a training camp. She had written, last year I sat here and I said you, and it was the most honest thing I had said in 6 weeks of not being fully honest. I was afraid of it, the honesty. I had been managing everything for so long that one word without management felt like a significant exposure. She wrote, I am not afraid of it now. She wrote, I find I have not been afraid of it since the moment he showed me 19 pages, since the word yes written between us, since the Thursday in the gym when he said my name in the register, that names carry when they mean something. She wrote, I have a new section in the study journal. It is the longest section. It is the one I add to most consistently. It is the one that has the least framework and the most truth. She looked at him beside her. He was writing with the urgency that meant he had found something worth keeping. She watched his handwriting, and she thought about the first morning, the hallway, the 11 seconds, the unguarded smile. She thought, I noticed him before I understood what noticing meant. She thought, I understand it now. He looked up, he caught her looking. He did not adjust, he did not manage. He looked back with the expression that had acquired a name over a year of observation. She had named it, finally, in the study journal on the 48th page of the ongoing track. She had written, I have been trying to name the expression for 11 months. I have been building vocabulary for it since October first year. I have now concluded that the vocabulary I needed was not technical. The expression is not a category. It is the specific way someone looks at you when you are the thing they have been paying attention to completely, when you are the subject of the full version of their attention. I know this look from the outside because I have been told I give it too. I know it now from the inside too. She had written, the expression is being seen. She had written, I have been seen since the first morning. She had written, it took me 11 months to have the correct word for it. The word is home. He looked at her across the overlook in the late light. She felt home. She said, how many pages now? He looked at his notebook. He turned to the ongoing entry. He counted. 67, he said. She looked at her study journal. She counted the ongoing track. 93, she said. He looked at her with the expression. You have more than me, he said. I started the framework earlier, she said. The first week I was still writing clinical observations. Those inflated the count. The clinical observations ended at week 2, he said. Yes, she said. What were they after week 2? She looked at the study journal. She looked at him. She opened it to the ongoing track. She turned to page 1 of the honest pages, the ones after the framework had stopped being adequate. She handed it to him. He read it. She watched him read it the way she had always watched him, completely, honestly, with the specific quality of attention she had been giving him since before she understood what she was giving. He looked up. He said, You wrote this in week 2. Yes, she said. This is, he stopped. He found the sentence. This is exactly what I was writing at the same time. I know, she said. You showed me your week 2 entries in December. I recognized them. He looked at the journal. He looked at her. We were writing the same thing in separate notebooks, he said. From the beginning, she said. We were paying attention from the beginning. He was quiet for a moment. Can I write something in it, he said, in your journal? She looked at the study journal, the most honest document she produced, the one that held everything she had not shown anyone before she had shown him pieces of it across a year of Tuesdays and gym floors and overlooks. She handed it to him. He found a blank page at the back. He wrote for a while. His handwriting went deliberate, the kind that meant it mattered. He handed it back. She read. He had written, I came to UA with 15 notebooks and the specific understanding that what I wanted was to become the kind of hero that people like me could believe in. I understood wanting that. I had a framework for that. I had notebooks for that. I did not have a notebook for the first morning in the hallway when I looked up from my notebook and found someone already looking and felt, before I had any framework to put it in, that something had located something. I did not have a framework for 44 pages becoming 67 pages and climbing. I did not have a framework for the overlook or the gym floor or the Tuesday evenings or any of the days that have added to this specific fact, that I am different than I was on the first morning, and the difference has a name, and the name is you, Momo, not a category, not a framework, you. The specific fact of you that I have been writing about for a year, in a notebook that started with 4 pages, and which I will keep adding to for as long as there are pages, and then I will start another notebook. She read it twice. She looked up. He was watching her with the expression she had named home. She felt it at the full volume she had stopped managing since October. She said, You said for as long as there are pages. Yes, he said. How long is that, she said. I don't know, he said. Long, the notebooks keep going. She looked at him. She thought about the first morning. She thought about 93 pages and 67 pages, and the ongoing tracks that were still adding because the things that were real did not stop being real when the entry ended. They kept going and the next entry found them still there and grew from that. She said, Then we keep adding pages. He said, Yes. She said, Both of us together. He said, That's what together means. She smiled, the full one. He looked at her smile with the expression. The overlook was the same light as the first time, the same forest, the same quality of late afternoon that made everything the specific shade of gold that good things were made of. She took his hand, not dramatically, not as a gesture, as the most natural extension of a year of accumulating ordinary days, as the next thing in a sequence that had been building toward this the way everything builds toward its actual self when given enough time and attention. He looked at their hands. He looked at her. He said nothing. He did not need to. She felt it in the quality of the silence, the same quality as the Tuesday evenings in the library, the silence that was already full. She opened the study journal. She wrote with her free hand. She wrote, This is the ongoing track, entry 94. The light is gold and the forest is below, and I have his hand and he has mine, and I have been paying attention since the first morning, and this is what the attention has always been pointing toward. Not the analysis, not the framework, this, the actual thing. She wrote, I was not prepared for this. She wrote, I do not need to have been. She wrote, I have 94 pages and an ongoing entry, and a person beside me who has 67 pages, and will have 68 by the time we go back, and who writes my name in the register that names carry when they mean everything, and who made the world more real to me from the first morning, by simply being in it, and paying attention to it, and paying attention to me. She wrote, I have been seen since the first morning. She wrote, I have been home since the first morning. She wrote, "I know that now." She closed the journal. She sat in the gold light with his hand in hers, and the study journal in her lap, and the ongoing track still going, and the notebook still full, and the specific quality of being exactly where she was without any framework required. He wrote something in his notebook. He showed her without speaking. He had written, page 68. The last line of this entry is, "She has my hand and I have hers, and that is enough data for all the conclusions I have not been ready to write until now." He wrote below that, "I love her." She read it. She took the pen. She wrote below his sentence, "I know." She wrote, "I love you too." She wrote, "I have loved you since I stopped having the framework for it. Since week 2 when the clinical observations stopped being adequate. Since the hallway on the first morning when you smiled before you knew. I was watching and something in me noticed before I understood what noticing meant." She wrote, "I have been writing toward this for a year." She wrote, "I am going to keep writing." She handed the notebook back. He read it. He looked at her. She looked at him. The forest was gold. The light was the specific quality that good things were made of. The overlook held the history of 2 visits now and everything the visits had produced, and the ongoing quality of something that was not going to stop producing. He said her name in the register. She said his. They sat in the gold light. The notebook stayed closed. Some things did not need pages. Some things just needed to be in. She was 17 years old and she had 94 pages of the ongoing track, and a hand in hers and a year of Tuesday evenings, and a name written in someone else's notebook without a category because the category did not exist, and the word was her and the word was him, and together the word was this. She did not need more language. She had always known that the most precise things eventually ran out of language. She had not known until this year that running out of language was not a failure of precision. It was precision itself. The most accurate thing she had ever arrived at had no words. It had his hand. It had her hand. It had the gold light and the ongoing and the notebooks full of a year of paying attention that had always been pointing here. Here. This. Home. The overlook held the evening. The notebooks would open again tomorrow. The pages would keep going. But tonight the study journal stayed closed, and the notebooks stayed closed, and 2 people who had been paying attention to each other since the first morning sat in the specific warmth of having finally arrived at the actual thing. Not notes on the thing. The thing. And it was everything they had written toward. And it was more. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching this full story from beginning to end. If you made it here, you are a true fiction Flux fan and we see you completely. Drop a comment telling us what story you want next. Subscribe, like, and share Fiction Flux with every anime fan you know. We will see you in the next one.